Hey everybody, and welcome back to another fun and exciting pre-algebra class. In today's lesson, we'll be talking about fraction arithmetic. I know that's your favorite thing to talk about, and you might say, well, I think we're skipping a lesson. Well, this is 1.8. I did skip 1.7. What I'm going to do, because 1.7 is very short, 1.8 is long, I'm going to put 1.7 with 1.9. So we're going to kind of skip it for now, but we are going to come back to it and talk about it. But skip to 1.8 fraction arithmetic. That is on page number 31 in your book, page 31. 5 over 12 plus 1 over 6. Okay? We want to add those together. Well, we cannot add those together yet. We can add those together, but we can't add those together yet. We have to get what's called the common denominator. Okay? How do we find the common denominator? Well, what we want to do is we want to find the LCM. LCM. You also hear me call this the LCD, least common denominator. And that's what we need right now, the least common denominator. Well, maybe just from looking at those two, 12 and 6, you know what it is. But I will give you a couple clues. It cannot be less than, well, actually, it cannot be less than the biggest number. It can't be. So there's no way it can be 6. It can't be 3. It can't be 2. The smallest number that this could be is 12. That's the smallest number. Now, it could be bigger than 12, but that's the smallest. Let me show you just a couple ways, a couple shortcuts. Maybe you didn't like how I showed you LCM the other day. One way that you could do this is you could say 1 times 6 equals 6. 2 times 6 equals 12. 3 times 6 equals 18. I'm going to stop there because you're going to see why in just a second. Then I'm going to do 12. So 1 times 12 equals 12. Okay? Now, as soon as you get a matching number right there, that matching number is your LCD. This 12 is the lowest common denominator. Okay? And I showed you a different way to do it the other day where you do it like this. So you do 6, and then you do by 2, and you get 3, and you do 12 by 2, and you get 6, and then by 2, and you get 3. And then if you remember right, I said you take the pairs, and you multiply those together. And then here's another pair, the 3's. And then you take what's left over, and you multiply that. So watch what I get. 2 times 3 is 6 times 2 is 12. Okay? So 12 is your LCD, and you can do it a couple of different ways. I kind of like, for some of the simpler ones, I kind of like this method because I really do that method just in my head. I just kind of scan through those in my head, and I'm like, okay, I've got it. And so maybe you can do that. Maybe you can figure it out in your head, but you have to find the LCD. Once you find the LCD, you're going to make new fractions that you're going to add together with a common denominator. So what we would do here is we'd say, okay, 12 times what gives me 12? Well, 12 times 1. So then you have to do the numerator because you have to keep the fractions the same. You can't change the fractions. And the way that we keep them the same is by multiplying them by the same thing. 5 times 1 is 5. So that fraction stays the same. Down here, we say 6 times 2 gives me 12. All right, and so we'd say 1 times 2 gives me 2. So here are our new fractions. 5 over 12 plus 2 over 12. Now we just do the math, and 5 plus 2 is 7 over 12, and that would be our answer right there. Okay, so that's addition with fractions. What's the trick? Find the LCD. Once you find the LCD, then you go ahead and add. Okay? Now let's do a subtraction problem. So now we have, let's say, 7 over 10 minus 1 over, let's do something somewhat simple, 1/2. We'll do 1/2. Okay? All right, so we're subtracting now. The same thing applies. We, again, need to find the LCD. All right, so let's go back to this LCD idea. And maybe you've figured it out quickly again. But if we take 2, 1 times 2 equals 2. 2 times 2 equals 4. 3 times 2 equals 8. Let's see, 6. 4 times 2 equals 8. And 5 times 2 equals 10. Well, look what I got right there. I got a 10. So if I do 1 times 10, I get 10. Oops, sorry. I get 10. Let's try it again. That's not a very good 10. There we go. All right. And so what we have here is we have 10 as the LCD. And maybe you saw that even before I started doing that math over here with the LCD. So I have 10 and 10. So I'm creating new fractions. I go up here and I say 10 times what equals 10? Well, 10 times 1 equals 10. 7 times 1 equals 7. That fraction stays the same. There's no change. Now, sometimes the top fraction is going to change. I just did the last two, just didn't have any change, but sometimes they do. Now down here, I say 2 times 5 gives me 10. So I say 1 times 5 gives me 5. All right, now I have 7 minus 5, and I get 2 over 10. I just do the math. Now, I have a problem with this. This right here is not your right answer. Okay, it's close. But we now need to reduce this. Why did I show you GCF and LCM? Why did I show you those things? Because we need them. We need them in order to do fractions. Right here, we need to reduce this, so we need to find the GCF. What is the GCF? Okay. The GCF is the number that goes into, that's a factor of both of those. We could do it the way we did it, but I'm telling you, whenever you have a 2, the only thing that goes into 2 is 2. All right, so the GCF is going to be 2. And so 2 goes into both of these. 2 goes into 2 1 time. 2 goes into 10 5 times. The answer to this problem is 1/5 because you have to reduce. And if you're not good at this, you just need to practice it. The more you practice, the better you will get, I promise you. Okay? Now, let's go into multiplication. If we want to multiply two fractions together, this is actually easier than adding and subtracting. Here's the crazy thing about algebra. When you get into algebra, you're going to find that multiplying and dividing is actually easier than adding and subtracting. And I know in baby math, it's much easier to add and subtract. Okay, 3 plus 3 is easier than, 6 times 9. So what we want to do is go ahead and write out a problem. Let's say it's 1/2 times 2/3. All right, so there we go. A couple different ways that I can go about this. One way is to just go ahead and multiply numerator times numerator. Okay, so 1 times 2 equals 2. Then I can come over here and I can do denominator times denominator. What do I get? 6. 3 times 2 is 6. Now if you notice, this fraction needs to be reduced. Why does it need to be reduced? Because it has a GCF of 2. In other words, 2 goes into both of these. 2 goes into 2 1 time, 2 goes into 6 3 times. The answer is 1/3. Now, I can save you that last step. I can show you a little bit of a shortcut to save you the GCF step. Check this out. If I come back here to this right here, I can cross cancel. All right, so I can go cross. I basically am reducing across before I get started. And so I could reduce this way as well. 1 and 3, there's no GCF there that's going to work. 1, but it doesn't help you. Here, I can divide both of these by 2 and get 1 and 1. Okay? So in other words, I can cancel these to 1 and 1. You understand? The 2 goes into both those. 2 goes into 2 1 time. 2 goes into 2 1 time. So both of those turn into a 1. Now check this out. Now I'm going to multiply my numerators, and I get 1. I'm going to multiply my denominators, and I'm going to get 3. There's my answer again, 1/3. Probably you like that method better. Why? Because it saves you from finding the GCF at the end. You don't have to reduce at the end. All right. I told you multiplication was easier, right? So it is. All right, now let's do a division problem. So now let's do 1/4 divided by, let's do 1/2. 1/4 divided by 1/2. Now the only thing, here is the only trick on these. There's really two steps. Step number one is to flip the second fraction. Okay, what do I mean by that? Take the second fraction and flip it. Just switch it. So in other words, I'm getting rid of 1/2 and I'm flipping it to 2/1. I just flip it. Put the numerator on top, put the denominator on the bottom. Just flip it. Okay? The second step that we have to do is multiply. Then we just multiply. So in other words, change that divide, just change it to multiply. That's all we're doing. Okay? And I'm putting a dot for multiply. You understand that, right? Okay. I'm not putting an X. Why? Because we're in pre-algebra, and in algebra class we use letters, so I'm just using this raised dot to signify multiplication instead of using the X. All right, so here we go. Let me erase some of this so we can see it a little bit better. All right, so now we have, all right. Now again, we go back to multiply. All we're doing is multiplying. So we can cancel. Notice that 2 goes into both of those. 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into 4 two times. Now I just multiply these tops, and I get 1. Multiply the bottoms, the denominator, and I get 2. The answer is 1/2. 1/2. Okay, so multiplication, a little bit easier than addition and subtraction. Division is the same thing as multiplication except for step 1. We flip the second fraction. Okay, flip the second fraction. And you're going to see how that works the longer we go into it. All right, let me do one more thing. So it's kind of part of yesterday's lesson, but we didn't really get into it. We just did ratios yesterday, but I want to do what's called a proportion. We're going to solve one of these. It's arithmetic with these fractions, but we're going to solve for a missing number. What do I mean by that? Well, here's what I mean. Let's say that my fraction is 3/4 equals question mark over, I'll put 8. I'll put an easy one. So maybe you can look at this and go, oh, I know what this is. And one way to do this, okay, one way to do this is to say, okay, 4 times what gives me 8? Well, 4 times 2 gives me 8, right? So remember how we changed the fractions in addition and subtraction? We could say 3 times 2 gives me, and the answer would be 6. In other words, 3/4 is the same as 6/8. And we did that before, right, with the pizzas? So we did 3/4 of a pizza, 1, 2, 3, 4 would be the same or equal to if we cut it into 8 pieces, and we did 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Look, we still have the same piece missing. That's 1/4 missing, or 2/8. So those are equivalent fractions. So what we're doing here is making equivalent fractions. Now, what happens if it's not that easy? 1/4 equals, let's say, question mark over 10. 1/4 equals question mark over 10. Now, here's the problem. You can't say 4 times 1. No. 4 times 2. No, that's 8. 4 times 3. No, that's 12. 4 times what gives you 10? Well, 4 times nothing. Well, there actually is something, but 4 times no whole number that comes to our mind. So what do we do? Okay, this is where I want to teach you a second technique to solving these. And what we want to do is we want to say the means equals the extremes. And that doesn't make any sense to you right now. But the means, the middle terms, which are going to be these ones right here, are going to equal the extremes, which are these ones right here. So in other words, here's what I mean by that. When we multiply this, 1 times 10, this is going to equal 4 times our question mark. And we'll get into this when we get into algebra. We're actually going to turn that question mark into an x, okay? And we'll work with it with an x. But for right now, let's leave it as question mark. How are we going to do this? Well, the way that we can do this, the trick to this, is this little formula right here. If you take this and you multiply, okay, 1 times 10, and then you divide by the other denominator. So we're going to multiply and then divide. So watch this. Here's what happens. 1 times 10 divided by 4. And this is going to give us our question mark. This is going to answer the question for us. So 1 times 10 equals 10. Divided by 4 equals, you say, I don't know what that equals. Well, then just do it. 10 divided by 4. Okay, well, that goes in there twice, and I get 8. Subtract, and I get 2. Now what can I do? Well, now I can put this over this, or I can keep going to a decimal, either way. So if you want to put it over this, so 2 over 4, you say 2 and 2 over 4, reduce that fraction, it comes out to 2 and 1/2. 2 and 1/2. The other way that you could do this is once you get 2 right here, you could continue this on by adding a decimal point and adding zeros until it comes out evenly, right? So I put my decimal point and then I bring down my 0 and I get 20. So now 4 goes into 20 how many times? 5 times. 5 times 4, 20. So now I've got my 0. It's 2.5. If you know anything about math, you know that 2 1/2 equals 2.5. Okay, these are the same thing. So you could write that either way. So our answer there is 2.5 or 2 and 1/2. So what is the x? 2.5. Okay, there you go. And that's how to do proportions. There's 2 different ways to do them. The easier way, obviously, is to do this, but sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes we can't just find out what it's multiplied by. So we actually have to do this method. Let me get rid of some of this mess so that you can see it a little bit easier, because I just want to go back and show you the form right here, okay? And here's what it is. Multiply across and then divide. Multiply and then divide, and you will get the correct answer. All right, lots of stuff packed into that lesson, right? Hopefully it was review. Hopefully you've done that before. That was not new to you. But I know that students really, really need a lot of help and review on these fractions, how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. We've been talking about the last 2 videos, and I need you to work really hard on this because, like I said in the last video, this stuff is all really, really important in algebra class. So work hard on those fractions. That's all I've got for you. Hope you learned something. We'll see you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.